Is Volkswagen its own worst enemy? They have a string of offences against them for lack of regulation or downright cheating, and these date back to 2006. And it was back then that BMW, Daimler, Audi, VW, and Porsche all got together. They all at that time had technology that could reduce emissions, and they all jointly decided not to install it on their cars because it would cost money and reduce profits. And as if that wasn't enough, there was a follow-up whereby they had Dieselgate, and this is the one most people know. And this is when they put their cars in for testing, mandatory testing, but the car computer would detect it was being tested and drop the engine into a special super economy, absolutely zero emission mode, so that Volkswagen could then claim it was a super clean car. Just raises a question. If they're that good on software for beating the emission test, how come with the ID series of EVs, they can't get the software right? Maybe they should get that software writer to... Anyhow, that's going another story. It seems public trust in the legacy auto market is not there anymore. And we have to wonder what Volkswagen can do to bring that trust back to us, the consumers. I'm Dave, this is Dave Takes It On. With Volkswagen scrambling to hit vehicle targets in both the UK and the EU, many of you will be well aware of a scandal called Dieselgate, but you probably will not have heard of Monkeygate. There's much more going on behind the scenes than most people realise. That is the reason regulators are so important. By the way, if you do like the content of this video, please subscribe. Most people think Dieselgate was the first one. It certainly wasn't. Before that, 2006, there was a collusion. And this involved 5 of the manufacturers: Volkswagen, Audi, Porsche, BMW and Mercedes. And they at the time were being asked by Europe to reduce their emissions, particularly CO2. And at that time, they had modern technology that would achieve this on their cars. But the 5 of them got together and jointly decided that none of them would actually start installing this, because if one did, they all did. And the reason none of them wanted to install it, it would raise the price of a car and reduce their profits. By not fitting it, it reduced their costs and increased the profits. And that one came to a head many years later, and they ended up with a fine of 875 million euros for collusion. And for those of you who think that's the end of the scandal, nowhere near. Monkeygate is one you probably haven't heard of. And this one dates back to 2014. And this was where we believe that Volkswagen realised the regulators were closing in on them, were likely to find them in breach of regulations. They decided to commission a clinical laboratory to carry out emission tests on primates to see if they survived. Now, thankfully, the test was abandoned before any of them did actually die, and we've no idea what the results would have been. But it just shows the lengths some companies will go to preserve low costs and high profits. So we have a situation where this is an ongoing thing, and if people think this is all over with, it's only last September 2024 when the Japanese auto industry had to withdraw some of their cars for sale because the emissions that they reported were not quite accurate. Consumer trust was hit very hard indeed. Many buyers wondered who they could actually trust when they were choosing their car. And that's led at the time for VW to enter into the EV market rather ahead of everybody else, because they thought, well, we can't fiddle emissions on EVs, which have none. So it was a sort of get out of jail card for them, they thought. However, this could also be seen very much as greenwashing, because the one car that everyone has been waiting for is the Polo replacement, which is the ID.2. And that was announced back in 2023, but instead Volkswagen have launched the ID.7, a big SUV, and the ID. Buzz, a big minibus. So if they were really serious about this, they would go to the bottom end of the market, the budget end of the market, and the VW Polo and VW Golf regularly appear in the top 10 cars sold in both the UK and the EU. So in terms of trust, we're not back there yet. They have less scope to, let's say, manipulate the figures with EVs. The first one is there are no emissions at all. So that standard just doesn't exist with EVs. You either have an EV or you don't. If you have an EV, there are zero emissions. Obviously, there's scope for manipulating the figures with regard to range and efficiency, but this is very much more limited these days because the regulation has caught up with them to a large extent. What's happened is they now cannot build in a special program, which they used to do in the past, which was a super economy program that they would use for the range tests and the efficiency tests. What the regulators now say, and these are independent tests, by the way, not done by Volkswagen, but the independent testers now have to test each of the various functions available for the driving modes. So if you have an economy mode, a sport mode, a comfort mode, a range mode, whatever modes you have, they now have to test their car, each car, against each of those modes within that model. And then they have to publish those results, which you'll find in the NCAP results as well, by the way. They have to publish those results so you can now see, first of all, they're not manipulating figures anymore. These are actual tests done. But secondly, you can now see what you are likely to get as a best case scenario. Now, like the sticker in the windscreen of petrol cars, chances of getting the actual figures they quote are pretty small because they are idealized testing. But if you use them in the way they're meant to be used, and that is just to compare one car to another and not take that as a gospel, this is the figure you will get. So if an ID.2, for example, is likely to get between 4 and 6 miles per kilowatt hour of battery power, and a ID. Bus gets between 2 and 3, you know whatever you actually get, that the ID. Buzz will be using probably twice as much electricity as the ID.2. So it's really good for comparison. And with having to test all the modes, they can't manipulate the figures anymore. It's all designed to build trust back into the market. We should be able to go into a showroom or order online and see figures there that actually have some reality. Now, we see loads of tests. CarWow is a famous one. Oh, we drove these 6 cars until they actually ran out. Yeah, they're sensationalized videos, and they're not really meant for real life because nobody in their right mind would actually drive the car until the battery went flat. And in every case that they've tested, the car gives so many warnings about you're running out, you're getting close, you must do something. And if you just keep on ignoring those, well, maybe you deserve what you get. But they are interesting to see how close that these tests get when they're out on the road, how close they get to the actual figures that are published, which is WLTP, which is a standard now across all the Western world. The only country I believe that doesn't use it is China. So you can now look at cars and say that one is twice as efficient as that one. Therefore, on a given journey, that one will use half as much electricity as that one. And therefore, whatever you pay for your electricity, it will be half the price to drive that distance than the other one. And that's useful comparison, something we should look at, and also look very closely at which of those modes is most important to you. For example, if you only ever use it for commuting and you do a 5-mile each way commute each day in heavy traffic, look at the city figures, which are very different to if you do a 10-mile motorway stretch to commute every day. That brings us back to today. What can you, the buyer, expect from the auto industry? It has changed quite dramatically. There's much more regulation now and much more supervision of that regulation to make sure that the figures are not being manipulated. So we are heading back towards a situation where a little bit of trust is building back within the buyers when they go in to look for a new car. We're not there yet. Just as late as last year, as we said, there was still, Japan was uncovering scandals. So we're not out of the woods by any mean, but we're not back to where the industry used to be. It used to be a champion of technology advancement, better models, better performance, better economy. Each model came out was a superb improvement. We haven't got back to those heady days anywhere near yet. We're heading that way with EVs, because EVs initially have been looked at with skepticism, but they haven't had the outright manipulation and blatant cheating that went on with the ICE testing. So we could be in for a good time now with EVs. We'll have to see how that goes in time, but I believe we're heading in the right direction. Please like, please subscribe. I'm Dave. If you'd like to help the channel further, then consider becoming a Patreon member. For about the cost of a cup of coffee every month, you get loads of goodies like outtakes, as if I get things wrong, but also a live chat where you can ask me questions and you will get personal answers. And also we do notify in advance where we're likely to be filming on occasions when we have spare time. So you're perfectly free to join us, and there you can actually buy me a cup of coffee, probably a donut or two. I'm Dave.